Hi, this is Group 1 presenting our microeconomics project. So heading right in here, we did our project over the U.S. beer market and Anheuser-Busch, aka Bud Light, and how the pandemic and other marketing effects had a serious back-end effect on the beer market overall, and especially Anheuser-Busch. So headed right in here. We have our table of contents, just going over some background about the beer market and pre and post pandemic overview. Then we go into our analysis about the controversies regarding Bud Light, the downturn as far as Anheuser-Busch, and then we have a little bit of a stock market analysis, some demographics, and our overall conclusion in this matter.
So to start out, we'll give a background briefing on the overall alcoholic beverage market for the globe and for the United States. Looking at some highlights from the global market overall, top competitors are included in the other category as non-alcoholic beers, other hard seltzer, and ready-to-drink cocktail brands at a astonishing 71%. Other brands that are well known include Corona, at a 6%, Heineken with a 5%, and all Anheuser-Busch brands, including Michelob, Bud Light, and Budweiser at a 2% overall market share for the globe. Global revenue as of 2023 per Statista is looking towards $300 billion, and their market growth expected annually at a 3.71% growth towards 2028. We also researched that the total volume is expected to grow by 1.5%, with the average volume per person per capita expected at 15.43 liters this year. Drilling down to the U.S. market, top competitors also include Bud Light, Michelob, and Dos Equis, all with 9, 8, and 7% market shares respectively, and Coors sitting at the bottom with 5%. Across the globe, from Statista, revenue is mostly generated in the U.S. with a total market value of $70.87 million in 2023, and the market growth in the U.S. expecting to grow at around a 2% annual growth towards 2028. As well as the globe, the volume in the U.S. is expected to grow just shy of 0.1%, but the average volume is expected to amount more in the U.S. to 53.19 liters this year. And as these market values and volumes increase, the retail pricing of units is also following this similar trend. Pulled from Statista, published in November of this year, shows that our average retail price per unit in 2022 was $3.79, with a rise towards $4.40 in 2028. Continuing on from these analysis of the market, we give a small background on Anheuser-Busch and its leading brand, Bud Light.
So Anheuser-Busch is an American brewing company founded in St. Louis, Missouri in 1852. They've kind of always been like the main icon for the American brewing industry, at least here in the States. And in 1982, they created Bud Light as a low-calorie alternative to their heavier lager, just to get people who are more, I wouldn't say health conscious, but people who like to drink beer, a lower calorie option, and, keep drinking alcohol.
So as we look more into the U.S. market, we look towards their beer consumption, both per capita and overall. Overall, from the years of 2013 to 2021, it has been both steady in numbers with only a slight decrease in 2017 and 2018. This chart that we found from Statista shows that beer consumption from 2021 to 2020 had been growing by approximately 40,000 cases. As defined by our chart over here, even during the pandemic when everybody was forced indoors and people were left at home with not a lot to do, this shows that they still had consumed their beer. If we look at this same statistic on a per capita basis, in 2020, though people were still overall consuming a similar amount to other years, overall consumption per person had dropped in 2020, but is still continuing on a steady upward rise. And according to Statista, On a per capita basis, there is a growth of almost 1.5% towards 2027 at an approximate 70 liters. Not just looking at consumption, we also look at the sales channels. Our first channel that we look at is beer, wine, and liquor stores in the US. This chart shows beer, wine, and liquor store sales from 1992 all the way to 2022. Showing that there was a steady increase every single year, with the largest jump happening from 2019 to 2020 during when the pandemic started. So what this graph shows us is that even though people were still held indoors and away from other families and restaurants, bars, concerting events, there was still a shocking amount of people that were consuming or purchasing beer at a very rapid pace. Drilling down to more sales by channel, the largest holding for sales channels was forecourt retailers, which essentially means it's the area from the store entrance to the main thoroughfare that is very common for gas stations or other convenience stores. And what we wanted to notably show here, left out, are clubs and bars. But why is this? Looking at a quote from Anson Frericks, who is a former Anheuser-Busch InBev executive, claims that shelf space in stores are the single largest determinant of sales. In this same article from the Food Institute written by Marcy Crater, shows that the take-home category is more important than bars and restaurants, which are only at a 20% of sales volume share per channel. Moving from that, we look at our top competitors in the US, which all include Anheuser-Busch, Molson Coors, Constellation Brands, who own popular brands such as Corona and Modelo, Heineken USA, and the Boston Beer Company, known for their Samuel Adams Boston Lager. From 2022 to 2023, we can see that the two largest companies had both an equal 2% growth in their market share, just based on sales volume and overall consumption from the US. So our conclusion about the pandemic's effects is, with more people at home, their consumption of alcoholic beverages rose. People went to brands they were more comfortable with and trusted. So more sales happened in stores, even as a rise of the pandemic and people being at home. Other than the forecasted opposite, we really saw a huge rise in revenues and profit. Including Anheuser-Busch and Molson Coors, overall sales seemed to jump instead of sink. So people still left their homes to make their purchases of necessities, which included alcoholic beverages. As well as this, local and state governments saw that this was happening and decided to shift their laws to allow liquor stores to stay open at different times of the day. That was weird.
Technical difficulties.
Excuse us for that. Bars and restaurants were included in these laws being shifted to sell alcohol to patrons at later times and during more days of the week, and public spaces and concerting events allowing alcohol sales to happen on public grounds and for them to be consumed during that time. So from this background we gave of Anheuser-Busch and our overall markets, we looked towards an analysis of what had happened to Anheuser-Busch and Bud Light. Starting with a marketing controversy that happened with a trans influencer, and moving on to some more recovery that Anheuser-Busch had made after their backlash they faced.
Going into some marketing controversy here, one major thing that happened just earlier this year was a beer promotion for Dylan Mulvaney, a transgender influencer, like we just mentioned. And kind of she was going out on her platforms and broadcasting Bud Light in different ways and drinking Bud Light. And then there was basically a boycott going on. There was a backlash going on in regard to a transgender influencer speaking out and just drinking a beer. The controversy started with a promotional video where she was, Dylan Mulvaney had cans on their face, Bud Light, celebrating day 365 of womanhood. So prominent figures for the backlash include Ben Shapiro, Donald Trump, and Kid Rock, where they were all speaking their opinions on the whole marketing controversy going on. By mid-April, sales of Bud Light in the U.S. had dipped 17%, while competitors like Coors and Miller Lite saw jumps nearly 18%. Overall, global sales of Anheuser-Busch dropped 1%. Reversing the damage here, Bud Light tried to maintain the marketing catastrophe that went on during May and April. The company tried many Hail Mary attempts here to regain support of their once loyal customers. A couple notable attempts include trying to reach out to the UFC to get branding there, and as well as the NFL. Pursuing deals with these brands because their audience obviously is their main consumer is beer, which maybe wasn't the right marketing with using Dylan Mulvaney. So with the UFC here in late October of 2023, the UFC, or the Ultimate Fighting Championship, more commonly referred to as the UFC, announced a partnership with Bud Light. There was a lot of money going on in this deal. The UFC, $100 million on the table to be partnered for 6 years. So, continuing with that, the backlash from the ex-Bud Light supporters continued. People were angry about this deal going on regarding multi-millions of dollars. Dana White, who was a big spokesman for the UFC, playing a part in this, accepting this proposal from Bud Light. Dana said, it is unbelievable, powerful, American-built business. A lot of their core values align with mine. I'm a big supporter of military and law enforcement, and I love their thing that they do, Folds of Honor, where they have spent something like $44 million over the last however many years for scholarships for fallen heroes, whether it's military or first responders. I could go on and on for days about how much I am aligned with Anheuser-Busch. Whenever there's a big natural disaster in the U.S., they turn the plant into a water bottling factory, and they've done like 100 million bottles of water for people in need during natural disasters. So as we got down to it, we started to talk, and I met with the CEO of Anheuser-Busch, and it was a no-brainer for me. After Dana said that, there was fans commenting on some backlash with the partnership in the UFC. Sean Strickland applauded Bud Light for taking the right steps to fixing their image. His exact quotes are what will be featured now. He said, "Hey guys, I'm on my way to training. I just found out Bud Light is a new sponsor of the UFC. And gosh darn, I applaud you guys." Strickland said in a video, "I am so proud of you guys for doing the right things after that major mistake. You know how I feel about transgenders. He goes hard in the paint, as one would say, just what I do. I'm the biggest advocate of biological females. If I said my views on transgenders, I would get kicked off Instagram. I cannot wait to pick up a big old Bud Light, a big old can of Bud Light and fix you, Bud Light, because you guys are doing the right thing. I, Sean Strickland, a representation of the American people, am going to fix you, Bud Light. Thank you for giving me money. Thank you for supporting my platform. I'm going to help you guys."
Sean Strickland also does play a character, so a lot of the things aren't 100% accurate what he says, like his actual opinions.
And even though it seems that this partnership with Dylan Mulvaney was something that Bud Light was wanting to move towards, it seems that they're wanting to still fix it, and that other people, including other influencers such as Sean Strickland, are applauding them for trying to fix their identity that they had mistakenly rebranded with a already established brand of Bud Light, and wanting to help them move towards a better light.
Yeah, so they also did something similar with the NFL. They have a strong history together, being tied together with many different sports such as the NHL, the NBA, just major American sporting leagues. And they kind of doubled down on the NFL, seeing as it's the most popular sport in America, and recreated some ads to kind of woo back the old customers, the old patrons of Bud Light. They created an ad, the Easy to Sunday ad, which was released, last week as of the article I researched for this. It was back in September, towards the beginning of the NFL season. And its release comes with Bud Light's attempt to rebuild its reputation with hardworking blue-collar Americans.
So overall, with this tragedy that had happened and other influencers helping to realign Bud Light with their consumers that had felt betrayed, An overall 10.5% drop in the second quarter revenue for Anheuser-Busch, with a public comment from Anheuser-Busch executives saying that this was primarily due to the volume decline of Bud Light. As stated before, sales in the U.S. had dropped 17%, while globally, AB InBev, their sales only dropped 1% overall. So with this conclusion, recovery is possible. While they might not be crowned the king of beers in America, being replaced by Modelo or other brands, they will be able to regain their sales back to a more notable time before this partnership had happened. It is a heavily politicized topic, so changing back their branding to their original idea to align with blue-collar customers is going to be an easy idea for them. And moving towards rebranding their seltzers, especially for their Bud Light seltzers, instead of using their already heavily branded Bud Light products, could be a better idea if they want to move towards a much smaller market to gain more shares with younger consumers. So with that, there are other things that had influence on the change of the United States King of Beers, showing that demographics being changed in the U.S. There is a growing minority non-white population toward 2060. From the U.S. Census Bureau, the top two ethnicities coming into the U.S. and starting families or creating a foothold here in the U.S. are the Asian and Hispanic populations, respectively at 101% calculated towards 2060 and 93.5%. So with these new ethnicities coming into the U.S., this brings changing traditions and changing tastes. This forces companies to get creative with their advertising to new demographics and to already established brands with these people. There are also other AB InBev brands on the rise. Most notably, Modelo and Michelob Ultra were already on track to surpass Bud Light, Michelob Ultra being another Anheuser-Busch brand. With these changing demographics, those are more impactful to Bud Light. The partnership is simply shedding light on this change that was already happening and only escalated it. And with changing demographics and tastes comes new consumers and other competitors into the market. Pre-COVID, pre the pandemic, there was a rise in microbreweries and craft beers. When the pandemic happened, most of these companies were forced to close their doors and all had applied for PPP loans so that they could try and keep their doors open through online sales channels. Younger generations are trying to move from light beers to different styles, including millennials moving towards sours and IPAs, and even younger consumers for Generation Z to go towards hard seltzers and ready-to-drink cocktails. Speaking on which, ready-to-drink cocktails and hard seltzers are easier to consume, having more tropical flavors and other tastes that are not common in most beer brands. They also include higher alcohol by volumes.
Just a butt in here, sorry to stop you, but I think going along those lines with the cocktails and hard seltzers, I think people sometimes, especially in the more recent years, younger generations tend to stray away maybe from beers, so going with like the tropicality things and ever so changing economies and stuff like that, I think there's new different tastes that are being brought into the world of drinks and beverages and stuff like that. So with a lot of branding going on and rebranding per se for even Anheuser-Busch, companies may tend to start, and like we're about to talk about here, start shifting towards those seltzers and different drinks that instead of going along that just beer taste that we've had for so long, and even going back to Prohibition, but just to mention that.
Perfect mention for that. Because as mentioned by David Walker, who is a Firestone Walker Brewing Company executive, there's always been a segment of the market that experiments with alcoholic beverages. Even though consumers might be moving towards seltzers, it does not mean that seltzers or other ready-to-drink cocktails have hurt beer in general. There is still a large population of older Americans or older consumers that are still drinking these beers and still experimenting with their tastes.
Yeah, and adding on to the change in drink market, there are drinks that get outlawed, such as the Old Four Loko, which A lot of people died from considering it's mixing an upper with a downer, that being an energy drink and alcohol. So who's saying that more developments with the current drink market don't arise and change it up again in another 5 to 10 years?
Exactly. Moving forward here, we have the stock analysis about how in real time the controversies in marketing things that went on and during the pandemic, how that has affected the stock market. Some current trends here with Anheuser-Busch in the market. According to CNN Business, the earnings per share fell by 8% quarterly and 5% annually. Maybe long-term investors not being, too happy about that one and not as aware that a marketing catastrophe was just over the hill. That being said, what goes down must come up. Stock analysts are actually signaling a buy trend right now because they believe the stock is undervalued. So there was 29, almost 30 analysts being polled, and almost 2/3 of them said, let's go ahead and say that this stock market's going to go up. And so maybe there we have a rise here of Anheuser-Busch back in the market. But there's also competition in the market, and because of the marketing stuff that went on and just the pandemic, the New York Post claimed that last week Anheuser-Busch announced it was laying off 400 workers at its corporate offices. Bud Light in recent weeks lost status as the nation's top-selling beer. And this article came out, I think, in August or September. And then we have Coors here, a parent company of Miller Lite, and Coors Light, Molson Coors, boasted its single best quarter of revenue since 2005, with a merger there and U.S.-based Miller Brewing Company. The backlash against Bud Light sparked by its partnership with transgender trans influencer Dylan Mulvaney. So as you can see, there's a chart there explaining that Molson Coors Beverage, their stock went up 5% in just a month.
So what's our overall conclusion about Anheuser-Busch and the U.S. beer market? Our overall conclusion is that while Bud Light may no longer be the king of beers due to changing demographics and tastes of new entrants, competition, and younger consumers, Bud Light can still regain their consumers back with a simple rebranding towards their seltzers and changing back their branding of their popular Bud Light to its core, where it was from the 80s and into now.
Bud Light obviously realizes they made a mistake by trying to change their target audience for their drink Bud Light instead of choosing like a seltzer or something else to test that experimental marketing with, which is why they're going after that old market with ads that are obviously targeted to people who used to drink Bud Light and moved on to drinks such as Coors Light or Miller Lite.
Yeah, I think we can all conclude roughly that, just like we said with those last couple of slides, the stock market, eventually things will recover, whether you have a marketing catastrophe, whether you have a pandemic. In America, things tend to resolve, slowly over time. And so we'll see that here in the coming years with what Bud Light does to continue to provide that almost rebranding from what they had before and then what happened as we showed. I think that just to wrap things up, Bud Light will be on the right course in the coming years, and hopefully they can continue to move their company in the right direction.
Thank you for taking your time to listen to us today. We hope these findings were sufficient for this project, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.
Thank you.